This is Tobi. His wife sent him shopping today. He wanders happily through the supermarket, but suddenly realizes he completely forgot what he needed to buy. He just can't remember and gets very frustrated. So let's look at the problem that Tobi has. He basically stands in front of a wild forest that he needs to pass. The problem is that Tobi is quite lazy and he does not want to pass through the bushwork. But Tobi has an idea. As any person with common sense, he's not going to take a machete and fight through the forest, but simply take a path that has already been built. So with 0 to none effort, Tobi is able to pass through the forest and reach his goal. But what does it have to do with his ability to memorize things? Well, his behavior can be applied to his brain. Instead of fighting through a dense forest, his brain will always favor to go down paths that have already been built. When we look, for example, at memory masters that can remember 1,000 digits within an hour, we realize that they do not have different brains, but use it differently. They know how to use the pre-built paths in their brain to store a large amount of memory. Research shows that their memorizing takes place mostly in areas of the brain that are used for spatial awareness and associative thinking. Instead of memorizing boring and naked data like the name Mr. Baker, they associate the data with certain visualization. For example, they imagine a real baker and connect it to the information of the name. So far so good, but how does that help Tobi to memorize what he needs to buy? Tobi needs to work with the mind palace. About 2,500 years ago in the ancient Greece, there was the poet Simonides. He was invited to a big feast to hold a speech and entertain the guests. After Simonides left the palace, it collapsed due to poor material. Quite sadly, everyone inside the palace was killed and their bodies were mangled beyond recognition. Simonides and everyone else was very sad and heartbroken. It was especially tragic because no one was able to identify their relatives and friends. Simonides, however, had an idea. In his mind, he entered the palace and walked through the room. By mentally passing by each seat, he was able to remember who was sitting on it. Simonides was happy because he was able to help the people in vain and, by the way, created a very powerful way to memorize things. Tobi immediately gets the hint and jumps to work on how to remember his shopping list. In his mind, enters a palace, most likely his own house, and puts here and there the items that he needs to buy. As Tobi understands, associative thinking works best when it's very creative and absurd. So Tobi enters his house, and the first thing he sees makes him very angry. There is milk pouring out of his post box. How can that happen? What does he need to remember? Milk. Then he walks into the living room, and there is a giant dinosaur chasing a flying chicken. What does he need to remember? Chicken. And, as the dinosaur shows, a toy for his son. In his mind, Tobi walks further through the house and enters the bathroom, where he sees a highly depressed pizza showering. What does he need to remember? Pizza and shampoo. He goes further into his bedroom, and what does he see there? A drunk dog drinking his wine. What does he need to remember? Wine. And he must also not forget food for his dog. Tobi is very happy because now he can remember all the things he needs to buy. Instead of fighting through the wild forest in his mind, he just simply uses the paths that are already there, and it makes it effortless for him to remember. As silly as this might sound, it can be applied to everything, from the exploration of America up to principles of how to analyze economic data. When building a mind palace, it's very important to use a familiar place that you know very well, like your home. Then you walk through it in your mind and place in each room bizarre and creative things that you associate with the data you want to remember. The more bizarre they are, the easier you will remember them. And most importantly, practice going through your mind palace. If you've done all these steps correctly, you will be able to memorize huge amount of data with no effort. The technique of mind palace has made it possible for Tobi to ace his shoppings and impress his wife, but it has also given him the ability to be successful without compromising on his laziness. And now enough of Tobi. It's your turn to remember.